My dear child. Everything seemed perfect. The wedding hall was glowing with lights, the guests were smiling, the music had already begun, and everyone believed this would be the happiest day of your soulmate's life. The vows were only moments away. The rings were ready. The families had finally gathered after months of planning. No one expected anything unusual to happen. No one imagined that within a few minutes, silence would replace celebration, tears would replace smiles, and one unexpected confession would change everything forever. Listen carefully. Don't skip. There are moments in life when the truth waits patiently for years. Not because it is weak, but because it knows that the perfect moment will eventually arrive. This story begins on exactly such a day when everyone believed the past had been buried forever. But some promises never disappear, and some love stories refuse to stay hidden. Your soulmate stood quietly near the wedding altar, dressed perfectly, smiling politely for the cameras, yet carrying an invisible weight inside their heart. While everyone around them celebrated, their eyes kept wandering toward the entrance as though they were still waiting for someone who was never expected to arrive. No one understood why. Not even they fully understood it. Deep inside, an old memory continued to whisper your name. Years earlier, before misunderstandings, before distance, before family pressure changed everything, there had been someone who made their heart feel completely safe. That person was you. Life had separated both of you without giving either of you the chance to explain what truly happened. Rumors replaced conversations. Assumptions replaced honesty. Decisions were made by others while both hearts remained silent. Eventually everyone believed the story had ended. Except one person. Your soulmate's mother. She had watched everything from the very beginning. She remembered every small detail no one else noticed. She remembered the way your soulmate smiled differently whenever your name appeared on their phone. She remembered how peaceful they looked after speaking with you. She remembered how hopeful they once were before everything suddenly changed. Most importantly, she remembered the terrible mistake the family had made. At the time, she had remained silent because she believed it was the safest decision. But silence had become the greatest regret of her life. As the wedding ceremony prepared to begin, she looked at her child standing beside someone they respected but did not truly love. A mother always notices what others cannot. She could see the difference between a smiling face and a happy heart. The guests continued laughing. The photographer adjusted the lights. The music became louder. The wedding officiant smiled and invited everyone to take their seats. Everything appeared normal. Yet inside your soulmate's mother, a storm had already begun. She quietly opened an old wooden box she had carried with her that morning. Inside were several forgotten memories. A handwritten letter. An old photograph. A small bracelet. And one folded note that had never been delivered. She had hidden these items for years. Every birthday. Every holiday. every family gathering. She thought about burning them. But something always stopped her. Perhaps because deep inside she knew that one day, someone would need the truth. She slowly unfolded the old letter once again. The handwriting immediately brought tears to her eyes. It wasn't written by your soulmate. It wasn't written by her. It had been written by someone who desperately wanted both of you to stay together but was never given the opportunity to speak. That letter revealed everything. It explained how misunderstandings had been intentionally created. How messages disappeared before reaching their destination. How false stories convinced both families that reconciliation was impossible. How fear became stronger than love. She closed her eyes. For years she had carried guilt heavier than anyone realized. Today, watching her own child prepare to promise forever while still carrying yesterday inside their heart, she could no longer remain silent. "Don't skip." The officiant finally asked everyone to stand. The ceremony officially began. Your soulmate tried to focus. They tried to smile. They tried to believe they were making the right decision. But every promise spoken aloud somehow reminded them of promises they had once imagined making with someone else. A strange feeling filled the room. Even the bride noticed that something felt different. The music continued. The cameras recorded every second. The guests waited for the happiest moment of the day. Then, just as the officiant prepared to continue, a trembling voice echoed across the hall. "Stop." The music immediately faded. Everyone turned. Your soulmate slowly looked toward the audience. Standing near the front row, with tears streaming down her face, was their mother, holding the old letter tightly against her heart. Her hands were shaking. Her breathing was uneven. For several long seconds, she couldn't speak. Then she whispered words that froze every person inside the hall. "I cannot allow this wedding to continue until everyone knows the truth about the person my child never truly stopped loving." The room fell into complete silence. Your soulmate's eyes widened. The bride stood frozen. Family members looked at one another in confusion. No one had expected this. No one knew what truth she was about to reveal. But one thing became painfully clear. The wedding was no longer the most important event happening that day. The truth had finally arrived. The silence inside the wedding hall became almost unbearable. No one moved. No one even whispered. Every guest stared at your soulmate's mother as she stood there holding the old letter with trembling hands. Even the musicians had stopped playing. The cameras continued recording, but no one behind them understood whether they were witnessing a wedding or the beginning of a truth that had been buried for years. Your soulmate slowly stepped away from the altar. Their heartbeat grew louder with every step. They had never seen their mother cry like this before. Not even during the hardest moments their family had ever faced. Mom. They asked softly, "What are you talking about?" She looked directly into their eyes. For a long moment she couldn't answer. It felt as though years of regret had become too heavy to put into words. Finally, she took a deep breath. "There is something I should have told you a long time ago," she whispered. "I stayed silent because I thought I was protecting you. But every day since then, I have realized that my silence hurt you more than the truth ever could." A wave of confusion spread through the guests. Some family members lowered their heads. Others exchanged nervous glances, as if they already suspected what was coming next. Your soulmate remained completely still. Every word their mother spoke felt strangely familiar, almost as if a forgotten memory had been waiting for this exact moment. She slowly unfolded the old letter. Its edges had faded with time. The paper had turned slightly yellow. But the words written on it were still clear. She looked at everyone gathered inside the hall before speaking again. "This letter was never supposed to stay hidden. It was supposed to reach my child years ago. It was supposed to change everything." The room became even quieter. Your soulmate's breathing became heavier. "What letter?" they asked. Their mother closed her eyes. "The last letter connected to the person you loved most." The moment those words left her lips, your soulmate's entire expression changed. A memory they had tried to bury suddenly rushed back. Late-night conversations. Dreams about the future. Promises that never had the chance to become reality. And then, the painful silence that followed. For years they believed you had simply walked away. For years they convinced themselves that you no longer cared. But somewhere deep inside, that explanation had never truly satisfied their heart. Their mother slowly continued. "You never stopped wondering why everything ended so suddenly. You asked questions. You searched for answers. And every time, I lied." A few relatives quietly wiped tears from their eyes. The weight of guilt inside the room had become impossible to ignore. "I told you they never wanted to hear from you again. I told you they had already moved on. I told you there was no future left." She paused. Then whispered. "None of that was true." The word struck your soulmate like lightning. For several seconds they couldn't even breathe. "What do you mean?" Their mother looked down at the letter. "This letter arrived only 3 days after your final conversation. They begged for one last chance to explain. They wrote that misunderstandings had separated both of you. They asked if you would simply listen. Just once." She swallowed her tears. "But I never gave it to you." The entire wedding hall gasped. Your soulmate stared at her in disbelief. "You kept it?" She nodded slowly. "I was afraid. I listened to people who convinced me that forgetting the past would make your future easier. I believed time would heal everything. I thought you would eventually stop loving them. Another painful silence followed. Then she looked directly into her child's eyes. I was wrong. I have watched you smile without happiness. I have watched you build a life while carrying invisible pain. I have watched you pretend that everything was fine. But a mother's heart always knows. She placed her hand over her own heart. You never stopped loving them. Your soulmate lowered their head. For the first time in years. They stopped pretending. Tears quietly rolled down their face. Not because they suddenly remembered you, but because they realized they had never truly forgotten. Every important decision they had made since losing you had been shadowed by one unanswered question. What if everything I believed was a lie? Now, that question finally had an answer. The bride standing beside them remained silent. She looked at your soulmate, then at their mother, then back at the unopened letter. Even she could see this wasn't simply about an old relationship. This was about unfinished truth. One elderly guest quietly whispered, "Some weddings are stopped by fate. But this one was stopped by honesty." Your soulmate slowly extended a shaking hand. May I read it? Their mother hesitated for only a second before placing the letter into their hands. The paper felt unbelievably light. Yet somehow, it carried the weight of an entire lifetime. They carefully unfolded it. Their eyes fell upon the very first sentence. The moment they read those opening words, their knees nearly gave way. Because the letter began with exactly the words they had dreamed of hearing again for years. And suddenly, every reason they had accepted for losing you began to fall apart. Your soulmate held the second envelope in silence. No one in the wedding hall dared to breathe too loudly. The music had stopped long ago, the guests remained frozen in their seats, and every eye was fixed on that small, aged envelope. It looked ordinary, yet everyone somehow understood that what was hidden inside had the power to explain years of unanswered questions. Your soulmate's hands trembled as they slowly broke the seal. Inside were several old photographs, a few printed messages, and one handwritten note. Before reading anything, they stared at the photographs. The first picture showed the two of you smiling together, completely unaware that life was about to separate you. The second showed a family gathering where everyone appeared happy on the outside, yet hidden behind those smiles was a secret no one had spoken about for years. Then they unfolded the handwritten note. The room remained completely silent. The note began with a confession. It explained that someone inside the family had believed the relationship between you and your soulmate would never be accepted. Instead of allowing both of you to make your own decision, they secretly interfered. Phone calls were blocked. Messages were deleted before they could be delivered. Meetings were cancelled without either of you knowing the real reason. Every misunderstanding that followed had been carefully created until both of you finally believed the other had chosen to walk away. As your soulmate continued reading, their breathing became heavier. Every sentence erased another lie they had believed for years. The pain they had carried was never caused by a lack of love. It had been created by hidden decisions made behind closed doors. Their mother quietly covered her face with both hands. Tears slipped through her fingers as she whispered, "I knew pieces of the truth. But I never realized how far it had gone." Your soulmate slowly turned toward her. There was no anger in their eyes anymore. Only heartbreak. All these years. They whispered, they were trying to reach me. And I never knew. The guilt inside the room became almost impossible to bear. Several relatives lowered their heads, unable to meet your soulmate's eyes. Even those who had never known the full story now understood that two lives had been changed because a few people believed they knew what was best. Your soulmate picked up one of the printed messages from the envelope. It was dated years earlier. The message had never been delivered. It simply read, "Please don't believe what you've been told. I never stopped loving you. Give me one chance to explain everything." The words hit them harder than anything else they had read that day. They closed their eyes and remembered every lonely night they had spent convincing themselves that you had forgotten them. Every birthday that felt incomplete. Every celebration that somehow felt empty. Every time they wondered whether you were happy without them. They finally understood that while they had been grieving in silence, you had been doing exactly the same. A heavy silence filled the hall once again. The bride slowly stepped closer. Her eyes were filled with compassion rather than anger. She gently looked at your soulmate and said, "I don't think your heart was ever truly here today." Your soulmate couldn't answer. Instead, tears quietly rolled down their face. For the first time in years, they allowed themselves to stop pretending. They admitted to themselves what they had hidden from everyone else. Despite everything that had happened. Despite the years that had passed. A part of their heart had never stopped waiting for you. Their mother reached into the wooden box one final time. Everyone thought it was empty, but she carefully removed a small velvet pouch that had remained hidden beneath the old letters. She handed it to your soulmate without saying a word. They slowly opened it and found a simple silver bracelet. The moment they saw it, they froze. It was the bracelet you had once given them as a promise that no matter where life took both of you, the bond between your hearts would never disappear. They had searched for it years ago and believed it had been lost forever. Their mother whispered through tears, "I kept it because I thought one day I would find the courage to tell you the truth. Every year I looked at it and prayed for another chance to make things right." Your soulmate held the bracelet tightly against their heart. Their breathing became unsteady as memories they had buried for years came rushing back all at once. The laughter you shared. The dreams you built together. The promises made beneath quiet skies. The hope that neither of you realized would be stolen by someone else's choices. Looking around the wedding hall, they suddenly realized that every decoration, every flower, every celebration surrounding them felt meaningless without honesty. A marriage could never begin while the truth remained hidden. Just as everyone believed the deepest secrets had finally been revealed, the doors of the wedding hall slowly opened again. Every guest instinctively turned toward the entrance. A courier dressed in black quietly walked inside carrying a small package addressed only to your soulmate. He politely handed it over and said, "This was scheduled to be delivered today. No matter what happened." Without another word, he turned and walked away. Confused, your soulmate looked at the package. There was no sender's name. Only one handwritten sentence across the front. "If the truth ever reaches you, open this immediately." The entire hall stood frozen once again as your soulmate slowly reached for the seal, knowing that whatever waited inside this final package might change everything they believed about you forever. The entire wedding hall watched in complete silence as your soulmate slowly opened the mysterious package. Their hands were still trembling from everything they had already discovered that day. Inside the package was a small journal wrapped in a faded blue ribbon, along with one final handwritten letter. The journal looked worn, as though it had been opened countless times over the years. Your soulmate carefully untied the ribbon and opened the very first page. Instantly, tears filled their eyes. Every page contained memories of you. There were dates. There were dreams. There were quiet prayers. There were moments describing the future you once hoped to build together. One page read, "Even if we are separated by distance, misunderstandings, or time, I hope one day the truth finds its way back to you." Another page read, "If our story is meant to end, let it end with honesty, not with lies." Your soulmate could barely continue reading. For years they had believed they had been forgotten. Now they realized they had been remembered every single day. They slowly unfolded the final letter. It was short, simple, but every word carried the weight of an entire lifetime. It said, "If you are reading this, then the truth has finally reached you. I never blamed you. I only wish that one day you would know I never chose to leave. Life separated us before either of us could explain what really happened. Wherever life takes us, I sincerely hope you find peace, happiness, and the courage to follow your heart instead of the fears of others. That has always been my final wish for you." The final sentence completely broke your soulmate. Not because it asked for another chance. Not because it demanded anything. But because it wished them happiness. Even after everything. They closed their eyes. Tears rolled freely down their face. For the first time in years, they understood what real love had always been. It was never about possession. It was never about pride. It was about wishing the best for someone, even when life became unfair. Your soulmate slowly turned toward everyone gathered in the hall. They looked at the bride. Then at their mother. Then at every family member who had witnessed the truth unfold. Taking a deep breath, they spoke calmly. "I cannot begin a marriage while my heart is still carrying unfinished truth. It would not be fair to anyone standing here today. The bride nodded with quiet understanding. She walked forward with tears in her eyes and gently smiled. "Thank you for choosing honesty," she whispered. "A marriage deserves two hearts that are completely certain." There was no anger. No shouting. No blame. Only acceptance. Your soulmate's mother embraced both of them, overwhelmed with relief and regret. "I cannot change the past," she said softly. "But I promise I will never allow fear to silence the truth again." One by one, the family members admitted their mistakes. Some apologized. Some cried. Some remained speechless. The wedding decorations still filled the hall, but now they served as a reminder that the strongest relationships are built on truth, not appearances. As the guests quietly began leaving, your soulmate stepped outside into the evening air. The sky was calm. The wind carried a gentle peace. They looked down at the silver bracelet resting in their hand and smiled through their tears. Not because every problem had been solved, but because the truth had finally been set free. Some stories are not remembered because they ended perfectly. They are remembered because honesty finally found its voice. And sometimes, the greatest miracle is not that love returns. The greatest miracle is that the truth arrives before it is too late.